Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to NoDQ&A video. Once again, third straight day in a row here on NoDQ.com and the YouTube channel, youtube.com/AaronRiftNoDQ. Got more of your questions regarding the latest happenings in the world of WWE, including the upcoming Superstar Shakeup, which is this Monday. A little bit sooner than expected, but we have Vince McMahon promising to shake things up. I guess this is a mini lottery or whatever it's going to be, a draft, who knows. But something's going to happen with the rosters this Monday on Raw. NoDQ.com will have you covered, of course. And with that being said, let's get down to your questions. First one today comes from B. Hill. Hey Aaron, what do you think are some possible superstar moves in next week's Superstar Shakeup? Right now, the big rumored move is AJ Styles to Raw, which, for me personally, as a fan, I'm not a huge advocate of that. I would like to see AJ Styles remain on SmackDown. I'd like to see AJ and Nakamura face off and establish Nakamura as a major superstar in WWE by having a great match with AJ. I think they need to do that match, and I think keeping them apart is not good for Nakamura. I think WWE needs to do that match before AJ Styles moves to Raw. So I cannot say that I am a huge fan of that move taking place, but it would not shock me if AJ goes to Raw. We see this happen every year. Whenever there's a lottery, WWE always likes to make the Raw brand stronger and the SmackDown brand weaker. And this past year, SmackDown has generally been considered to be the superior show on NoDQ.com's weekly polls. Raw won in August of 2016 when Kevin Owens won the Universal title, and then they never won the poll again until this past week, which was the night after WrestleMania when you had all the big things go down. WWE might want to boost the Raw brand, which doesn't surprise me at all. I could see AJ going to Raw, but as far as some of the other predictions go, I just think it would be good to shake things up with SmackDown and Raw. When it comes to the tag team divisions and the women's divisions, I think Charlotte going to SmackDown would be a good thing, because I think Charlotte versus Sasha and Charlotte versus Bayley has been played out, and it's looking like Bayley versus Sasha is going to be the main feud on Raw moving forward. Where does that leave Charlotte? It would make sense for her to go to SmackDown and feud with Naomi and feud with Becky Lynch. Gives her some fresh matchups. And you could always move Alexa Bliss to Raw so Alexa can be one of the top heels on the Raw brand. I could see that happening, something along those lines. And then for the tag division, maybe Enzo and Cass going to SmackDown and facing the Usos. Maybe Sheamus and Cesaro go to SmackDown. One of the top babyface tag teams from Raw goes to SmackDown, and maybe American Alpha goes to Raw and has a feud with the Revival. That is something I would like to see, and I think should be done on the main roster to really establish both of those teams. Let them have a kick-ass match in front of all the casual fans, and that way you get both teams over with the mainstream audience. That is something I would like to see. Got this one here from Hamp, the WWE Critic. Is there really anybody from either show that needs to go to the other show? I feel it's fine the way it is. I definitely feel there are some moves that can be effective, as I just talked about. Another one is Dolph Ziggler. Have Ziggler go to Raw. You could put Ziggler in there against Samoa Joe if Ziggler is going to be a babyface, or if Ziggler is going to be a heel. You could put Ziggler against Finn Balor. There are some fresh matchups you can do with Dolph Ziggler. I think the most productive way to do this is to create fresh feuds and fresh matches that we haven't seen before, and give guys that have been lost in the shuffle a chance to reestablish themselves. Maybe somebody like Apollo Crews could benefit from moving to Raw. Although with Crews, I think it's more of his character that needs a shakeup than anything else, not necessarily the brand he is on. But I would say make a few changes for the sake of creating some fresh feuds and matchups. That is what I think would be the most beneficial ways to shake things up in WWE. Got this one here from Harvey. Could you see the Hardys eventually getting singles pushes with Matt on Raw with the broken gimmick and Jeff on SmackDown? I would not rule it out, but I think it's unlikely. Like I said for the past few months, I think the most value in the Hardys is as a tag team in WWE. That is what the mainstream fans remember the Hardys from in WWE, being one of the all-time greatest tag teams. And there's a lot of matchups you can do with the Hardys as a tag team. You can do the Hardys versus Enzo and Cass. You can do the Hardys versus Sheamus and Cesaro, which is a program coming up. And then on SmackDown, you could do the Hardys versus American Alpha, or the Hardys versus the Usos. A lot of possibilities over the next year for the Hardy Boys as a tag team. Now, maybe a year down the line, you've gone through all those matches, then maybe you could consider breaking them up again and having them do singles runs. I think there's money with another Jeff Hardy singles run if done correctly, and if Matt Hardy is able to be creative with his gimmick and do the broken Matt Hardy gimmick, then maybe you could do that on the main WWE roster instead of TNA and have it be successful on a mainstream level. There is that potential. So I would not rule it out, but I do think it's a bit of a long shot. I think the Hardys will have a better run than the Dudleys. You know, some people think it's going to be like the Dudleys where it's just a nostalgic run and then they become opening match guys and then they fizzle out. I think with the Hardys it'll be different because the Hardys were, I think, generally a more successful tag team than the Dudleys, and both of them had successful singles runs, which is why I think that the door is open for them to possibly have singles runs in a year after this tag team run is through. Got this one here from Converse Craig. With The Miz losing at WrestleMania, do you think it would be smart for WWE to move him to Raw? No, that is one of the unnecessary moves in my opinion. I think The Miz is doing just fine on SmackDown. He has been awesome, to put it in The Miz's own word. He has been doing a tremendous job. Why switch him when it's not necessary? I think The Miz will be just fine on SmackDown. I think The Miz would get lost in the shuffle on Raw, quite frankly. I think it would be a mistake to move him to Raw. I think that you should avoid moving guys just for the sake of making Raw a stronger show. I mean, I could see WWE doing that just because The Miz has been so hot. WWE's attitude could be, we need to make Raw strong, so let's take whatever hot acts there are on SmackDown and put them on Raw, like AJ Styles and The Miz. I just think The Miz is totally unnecessary. I guess with AJ, it would make sense because you can do some fresh matches with AJ. You can do AJ versus Rollins, which is a match I would like to see, and AJ versus Finn Balor, AJ versus Samoa Joe. There are some possibilities with AJ on Raw. But with Miz, I think he's better off on SmackDown for sure. This one comes from Denz. How surprised do you think Miz was that people were cheering his Cena impression segment? I doubt he was surprised. Anytime you have somebody cutting a promo on John Cena and doing this worked shoot where he's ripping on Cena for being a phony and all that, you're going to get a babyface reaction. We've seen it happen many times over the years with CM Punk and Daniel Bryan. All these guys would rip into John Cena, and you know, this was part of Cena's response, that guys have been doing this to him for years and he's always pulled through in the end, which he did at WrestleMania, of course. We all know how that story was going to end up. But I was not surprised that The Miz got that reaction, and I doubt Miz being in the business for so long, I doubt he was surprised by it. I'm sure he felt it was going to get a positive reaction, and then, of course, coming out there on the SmackDown after WrestleMania, I mean, there was no question that he was going to get a huge reaction coming out there and making fun of John Cena for leaving to go to Hollywood and do more movies. Not a surprise at all. I would be surprised if he was surprised. Let's just put it that way. Alright, moving on here. From Wrestling Tubes. Do you think Alexa Bliss is one of the best heels in the company? Could you she best talker? Can they do a face turn? Do I think she's the best talker, I think is what you were trying to ask me. I think as far as the women go, she's one of the best talkers on SmackDown for sure. I think her and Charlotte have both been tremendous heels, which is why I think they could do a switch. Have Charlotte go to SmackDown and have Alexa go to Raw. and that way you have some fresh matchups, but you have a same type of dynamic. Alexa's been doing very well for herself, but she's already had matches with Naomi. She's already feuded with Becky Lynch. I think a switch to Raw would be very beneficial to her. But yeah, I think she's one of the stronger talkers in the company. Could she be a face at some point? Probably, but I would not do it right now. I think she's got a lot of momentum as a heel, and I think if you move her to Raw, she can keep that momentum going as a heel. And, you know, if Bayley is feuding with Sasha Banks, Sasha will probably be the top heel, but I think Alexa could be right up there with her as the top heel. I certainly think Alexa has some mileage left as a heel, but eventually, yeah, I could see her turning face down the line, especially if Sasha becomes a top heel and then you could have Alexa turn face and feud with Sasha. That's a possibility as well. This one comes from Michael Armstrong. Hey Aaron, any news or thoughts as to where Grand Metalik has been? Had a crappy debut in February, haven't seen since. Unfortunately, he has just been one of those guys that has gotten lost in the shuffle. I think one of my biggest criticisms of the Cruiserweight division is that it's only been focused on a handful of guys. It seems like every week it's the same 4 or 5 guys that are on the show, and that's what happens. You're gonna get guys lost in the shuffle. Maybe there's a way WWE could do it where more guys could be featured. But at the same time, WWE's trying to build up certain stars, and the general consensus is that if you're out of sight, you're out of mind. Unfortunately, this is the way it is. Some might argue, well, maybe 205 Live should be a longer show. Maybe the Cruiserweight should get more time. But to me, it would just be too much television. There's already enough television as it is. I already feel it's oversaturated. So even though I do think it's a criticism that only a certain amount of guys are being featured, I think more guys being featured would just make it overkill. And it would be hard for WWE to market guys if there are too many guys they're trying to push at once. So I understand it from both sides. With the UK guys possibly getting involved in the Cruiserweight division and WWE looking at more talents, it's going to happen. Some guys are going to get lost in the shuffle, and maybe that's why certain people that were part of the Cruiserweight Classic decided to not sign a deal, like Ibushi. Maybe he saw the way things were going to play out, where certain guys would get lost in the shuffle, and that was his fear, and he decided to sit out the WWE Cruiserweight division for now and perhaps wait for a better opportunity to come along. Got this one here from Jarrett. Do you think when Asuka gets called up to the main roster that she could be the first Paul Heyman girl? I like that idea. I think on paper that would work really well for her. You know, she's not known for her promos. She's known for being an ass-kicking machine, similar to Brock Lesnar. Very similar character, almost like a female version of Brock Lesnar. I think that could work really well. And it's something we haven't seen before. We haven't seen a Paul Heyman girl in WWE. I really like that idea, and I think WWE should seriously consider doing that when Asuka debuts on the main roster. So I think realistically it would be a great idea. It would work very well. Will WWE do it? That's their call. Who knows if that is something that has even crossed the minds of the creative team in WWE. But I would tweet out to them, Asuka, Paul Heyman girl. Let's do it. I would encourage that as much as possible. Tweet out to WWE. That's the best way you can make it a reality. This one comes from Drew Blue. Like that name. Interesting picture of the cat. What the hell's going on there? Do you think that it's possible that if Taker's hip surgery goes great, we could see him at WrestleMania 34 as the American Badass? Interesting little swerve there. Undertaker leaving his dead man gear in the ring and then re-emerging at WrestleMania 34 as the American Badass. It's cute, but highly unlikely in all likelihood, as I like to say. The Undertaker having full hip replacement surgery is a serious procedure, and it's very unlikely that he can wrestle again after that. Almost zero chance of that happening. Now, by some miracle, maybe he could wrestle again, but to me, there's no need. I think that what happened at WrestleMania 33 was a nice send-off. I think that there's no need for him to wrestle again. Even to do a match with John Cena, as much as I would like to see that match happen, realistically, it's just too late. I think it would have been perhaps too late this year for them to really have a match that would have lived up to expectations. I think that match should have been done several years ago. I think that it's best to, as the song goes, leave the memories alone and call it a career. It's just time to end it, unfortunately. This one comes from the Loneliest Monk. What are your 2 cents on Kurt Angle as GM? In my opinion, he's doing great and really selling the facial expressions. Not how you spell soft. I thought that that was great. I thought everything Kurt Angle did on Raw was great. I love the fact that he's back as the Raw General Manager. I think it's a great role for him. It gives him something to do without actually having to get in the ring. And there's always the possibility of him wrestling again. But for now, we get to see Kurt Angle on a regular basis. We get to see him interact with the new stars in WWE like Enzo and Cass and all these other guys, Seth Rollins. I think it's awesome to see Kurt Angle back, and it's a nice breath of fresh air to see Angle in place of Mick Foley. As much as I love Mick Foley, I felt that his run as GM had run its course and it was time to, as Vince would say, shake things up. So, big fan of it. This one comes from Jason Bush. Will Dean Ambrose always be known as the 3rd member of The Shield, always in the shadow of Roman and Seth? Probably. And I think that's unfortunate because when The Shield first debuted, a lot of people thought Dean Ambrose would go the farthest in WWE. But realistically, Roman Reigns has the look WWE loves. We all knew this from day one. And he's the guy that's going to be the guy. Seth Rollins, of the 3, I would say, is the most talented in the ring. And he's been pushed very strongly in recent years. I think Seth Rollins exceeded a lot of people's expectations because I'm not sure people thought Rollins would be the first guy to be world champion. But he ended up accomplishing that and becoming the breakout star of The Shield. Dean Ambrose is a great promo, but at the same time, I feel like he's been held back with his promos, and they're calling him the lunatic fringe, but he hasn't really been that lunatic that I think he can be. Why they have not turned him heel is a surprise to me, because I think a heel Dean Ambrose could potentially be that breakout character that we haven't seen yet from Dean Ambrose and could make him at the same level as Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. But until they do that, I think a babyface Dean Ambrose is going to be at a certain level and not pushed to the top in WWE. But heel Ambrose, if they are willing to take the handcuffs off and let him be an absolute lunatic that we know he can be, then maybe there's still hope for him. Got this one here from Alex Suggs. Hogan and Savage went to WCW and made a huge impact. Who would be the Hogan and Savage of this era if that happened now? The big problem is there's no WCW. TNA is not even close to any level of WCW when WCW was running well. TNA is not even at the level of WCW when WCW was running bad in 2000. I'm not sure if there's anybody that could be what Hogan and Savage were to WCW. I've said this before. I think that TNA would somehow manage to screw up Steve Austin or The Rock, and realistically, that's not going to happen. Rock's not going to TNA. Austin's not going there. CM Punk, if he went to TNA, I think they'd somehow manage to screw it up, and I think a lot of fans would be dealt a cruel dose of reality that CM Punk isn't this big mainstream star that they think he is. CM Punk might show up in TNA and pop a rating for 1 week and then they're back to where they were before. I really don't think there's anybody that could do it. And it's not so much that there are any stars out there that could do it, it's that TNA as a brand is at such a low level that even the biggest star would not be able to build TNA all of a sudden as this major brand. I just don't think it's possible. Alright, that'll wrap it up for this edition of NoDQ&A video. Thank you very much for tuning in and watching the video. Stay tuned to NoDQ.com this week for the latest regarding the Superstar Shakeup. We got some rumors up on the site now. And subscribe if you haven't already at youtube.com/AaronRiffNoDQ. And I will see you guys next time for more.